The day Frank left me for his 28-year-old assistant was the day I stopped believing in fairy tales. After 28 years of marriage, 2 children, and a life built around his career, I found myself at 58 with half our assets, an empty house, and the sudden, startling freedom of a woman with nothing left to lose. "You'll be fine, Mary," Frank said, patting my hand as he signed the divorce papers. "Take a cruise, join a book club, enjoy your retirement years." Retirement. As if my life was already over. I waited until his BMW disappeared around the corner before I allowed myself a single indulgent moment of despair. Then I did something that surprised even me. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that bubbled up from some untapped reserve of resilience I never knew I possessed. Frank was right about one thing. I would be fine. Just not in the passive, fade into the sunset way he imagined. The first month after the divorce was a blur of practical matters, dividing belongings, selling the family home, finding a modest apartment that I could afford on my teacher's pension. I'd spent 30 years in the classroom, teaching high school English and quietly putting aside money while Frank built his legal practice. My savings were modest, but carefully tended, like the herbs I grew on my windowsill, unspectacular, but resilient. My daughter Olivia called daily from Seattle, where she'd built a successful career as an attorney. "Mom, come stay with me for a while," she urged. "You shouldn't be alone right now." "I'm not alone," I assured her. "I'm simply by myself." There's a difference. My son Tyler's calls were less frequent and more awkward. He lived just across town with his wife Natalie, but the emotional distance between us had been growing since their wedding 5 years earlier. Natalie had made it clear from the beginning that my practical, middle-class ways were an embarrassment to her social aspirations. "The divorce is probably for the best, Mom," Tyler said during one of our brief conversations. "Dad was always so restless. You can relax now. Relax, retire, retreat." Everyone seemed to have a plan for my remaining years, and all of them involved a quiet disappearance from active life. Then came the dream, not while sleeping, but on a Tuesday afternoon as I walked past a vacant storefront on Madison Avenue. The small "For Lease" sign in the window caught my eye, and I stopped to peer inside at the dusty interior. In that moment I could suddenly see it clearly. Warm lighting, the aroma of fresh baking, small tables where people lingered over coffee and conversation. A place that felt like home to everyone who entered. I'd always loved baking. My grandmother had taught me as a child, passing down recipes that told our family history more eloquently than any photo album. During my marriage, I'd become known among friends for my desserts, always brought to dinner parties and faculty gatherings. "You should sell these," people often told me, and I'd laugh off the compliment, treating their suggestion as the polite exaggeration it surely was. But standing there on that ordinary Tuesday, something clicked into place. Why not? What did I have to lose? The real estate agent seemed surprised when I called about the property. "It's been vacant for almost a year," she explained. "The location isn't ideal for retail. Too far from the main shopping areas." "Perfect," I replied. "I'm not looking for random foot traffic. I want people to come specifically for what I'm offering." 2 weeks later, I signed a 2-year lease, using a significant portion of my divorce settlement as security. The agent clearly thought I was making a mistake, another late-life crisis sparked by personal upheaval. But I saw something she didn't. Opportunity. I called Tyler that evening, excited to share my plans. Natalie answered. "A bakery?" Her tone made the words sound like leprosy. "Mary, be realistic. Do you have any idea how many small businesses fail in the first year? Especially food service?" "I've done my research," I replied, keeping my voice even. "And I have a concept that's different from the standard bakery model." "Well, it's your money to lose," she said with a sigh. "Just don't expect Tyler to bail you out when it fails. We're saving for our own future." When Tyler finally came to the phone, his enthusiasm seemed forced. "It's great that you're keeping busy, Mom. Just maybe start small, like selling at farmers markets first?" Neither of them offered to help with the renovation. Olivia, despite the distance, was more supportive, sending encouraging texts and offering to fly in for the grand opening. "They don't get it, Mom," she said during one of our calls. "They can't see past their own narrow expectations." The 2 months of renovation were both exhausting and exhilarating. I worked alongside the contractors, learning about plumbing, electrical systems, and building codes. I sourced secondhand furniture from estate sales and antique shops, creating a space that felt comfortably worn rather than commercially slick. Every decision, from the color of the walls, warm butterscotch, to the style of lighting, vintage pendants with soft amber glow, was deliberate, designed to evoke the feeling of being in someone's home rather than a retail establishment. The heart of the space was the display counter, an antique library card catalog I'd restored and modified to hold small desserts in each drawer. Above it hung a sign hand-painted by a local artist, Sweet Memories Bakery and Cafe. A week before opening, Tyler and Natalie finally visited. They arrived in their luxury SUV, Natalie dressed as if for a casual photo shoot rather than a construction zone. Her eyes swept the space with barely concealed disappointment. "It's quaint," she said, touching a vintage table with the tip of one manicured finger. "Very rustic chic, though this location is certainly challenging." Tyler at least attempted enthusiasm. "The counter is cool, Mom. Very unique." "That's the point," I explained, trying to contain my excitement despite their dampening presence. "Everything here tells a story. The desserts will each come with a card explaining their origin. My grandmother's German chocolate cake that she made during wartime with rationed sugar. The lemon bars that got me through my first teaching job. Stories with desserts?" Natalie exchanged a look with Tyler that made my heart sink. "That's different. It's what will set us apart," I insisted. "People don't just want food. They want connection, meaning, a sense that they're part of something larger than themselves." "Well, I'm sure the retirement community crowd will love it," Natalie said with a thin smile. "Speaking of community, we should get going. We have dinner with the Crawfords tonight. Bob's considering Tyler for the new regional manager position." They left after less than 15 minutes, offering no help, no meaningful encouragement, just a vague promise to drop by the opening if we can. Opening day arrived with both terror and excitement. I'd hired 2 part-time employees, Jade, a purple-haired art student who managed the coffee service, and Miguel, a culinary school student who assisted with baking. Both had responded to my unusually specific job posting, seeking people who understand that food is about stories, not just ingredients. The first day brought a trickle of curious locals, most drawn by the simple, grand opening sign and the aroma of fresh baking. Each customer received personal attention, not just their order, but a brief explanation of its origin, an invitation to sit and savor rather than rush away. Mrs. Peterson, an elderly woman who used a walker, was my first repeat customer, returning that very afternoon. "The currant scones," she said, settling carefully at a table near the window. "They reminded me of my childhood in London during the Blitz. We had so little, but my mother always managed something special for Sunday tea." I sat with her during a lull, listening to her stories, realizing that this human connection was exactly what I had envisioned. Not just selling baked goods, but creating a space where memories could be shared, where people felt seen and heard. Olivia sent a massive flower arrangement that brightened the counter all week. Tyler sent a text. "Good luck with the opening, Mom. Sorry we couldn't make it. Crazy week at work." The first month was a financial disaster. I had expected this and budgeted accordingly, but the reality of seeing more money going out than coming in was still sobering. I adjusted opening hours, refined the menu based on what sold and what didn't, and most importantly, I listened to my customers. Mr. Davis, a retired history professor, suggested a weekly story circle where people could gather and share memories connected to food. Mrs. Peterson thought we should offer recipe cards for customers who wanted to recreate their favorites at home. Jade proposed a memory wall where customers could pin notes about their own food recollections. Slowly, deliberately, we implemented these ideas, creating not just a cafe, but a community. By the 3rd month, we had a small but loyal customer base. By the 6th month, we were breaking even. By the end of the first year, Sweet Memories had been featured in the local newspaper as a hidden gem that offered more than just excellent pastries, a journey through time through the language of food. Through all of this, Tyler and Natalie's distance grew. Invitations for Sunday dinners were declined with increasingly thin excuses. When they did visit the cafe, it was always brief, always with an air of indulgent tolerance, as if humoring an elderly relative's eccentric hobby. "You're working too hard, Mom," Tyler would say, checking his watch. "At your age, you should be enjoying life." "I am enjoying life," I would reply, "more than I have in years." During one of their rare visits, nearly 18 months after opening, Natalie made a remark that crystallized everything. As I served them my grandmother's Black Forest cake, explaining how the recipe had come from the old country and survived 2 world wars, she smiled thinly. "It's sweet how you found this little project to occupy your time after the divorce," she said. "So many women your age just fall apart when their marriages end." In that moment I understood. They were waiting for me to fail. My success, however modest, didn't fit the narrative they had constructed. The abandoned wife, finding comfort in a quaint hobby before eventually accepting her diminished place in the world. Every achievement, every small victory, was a challenge to their perception of who I was supposed to be. That night, after closing, I sat alone at one of the small tables, surrounded by the business I had built from nothing, and made a decision. I would no longer chase their approval or acceptance. I would no longer make myself small to fit their expectations. I would build something so undeniably successful that they would have to either acknowledge my capabilities or reveal their limitations. The next day, I applied for a small business expansion loan, using my consistent revenue and growing customer base as evidence of viability. My plan was simple but ambitious. A second location, a cookbook featuring our most popular recipes and their stories, and a line of packaged goods for local specialty markets. As I signed the loan application, I felt a sense of both liberation and resolve. The path ahead would be challenging, but I was no longer the woman Frank had left behind, unsure and defined by her relationships to others. I was Mary Donovan, small business owner, baker of memories, architect of my own future, and I was just getting started. The expansion loan was approved with surprising ease. My meticulous bookkeeping and the cafe's steadily growing revenue had impressed the loan officer, a no-nonsense woman named Barbara who confessed she was a regular customer. "Your financials are impeccable," she told me, sliding the approval documents across her desk. "And your raspberry white chocolate scones got me through my divorce last year." I signed the papers with a mixture of excitement and terror. This was real money. Not just my divorce settlement that I could afford to lose, but debt that would need to be repaid. The responsibility felt both heavy and exhilarating. That evening, I called Olivia to share the news. "Mom, that's amazing!" Her genuine enthusiasm warmed me across the miles. "Have you told Tyler?" "Not yet," I admitted. "I thought I'd wait until I've secured the new location. You know how he and Natalie feel about the cafe. Who cares what they think?" Olivia's protective indignation was clear. "This is your business, your success. They should be celebrating with you, not judging from the sidelines." She was right, of course, but the growing distance between my son and me was a wound I preferred not to probe too deeply. Instead, I channeled my energy into finding the perfect spot for the second Sweet Memories location. The new cafe would be in Westbrook, an up-and-coming neighborhood 15 minutes from the original. The space was larger, with better foot traffic and the bonus of a small patio for outdoor seating. The lease terms were reasonable, and the landlord, charmed by my concept, agreed to some of the renovations I needed. The day I signed the lease, I finally called Tyler. "That's a big step, Mom," he said after I'd shared my news. His tone was carefully neutral. "Are you sure you're not overextending yourself?" "The numbers support it," I replied, trying to keep the defensiveness from my voice. "First location is showing 20% growth year over year." "Well, congratulations then." A muffled voice in the background. Natalie, no doubt. "Listen, we're just heading out to dinner with Nat's boss. Can I call you tomorrow?" He didn't call tomorrow, or the day after. When I finally heard from him a week later, it was a brief text. "Good luck with the new place. Crazy busy at work. Talk soon." I refused to let their lukewarm response dampen my determination. The second location opened 4 months later with twice the staff and an expanded menu that included lunch items, each with its own story card, of course. The local paper did a feature on our expansion, highlighting our unique concept and loyal customer base. "Mary Donovan is reimagining what a neighborhood cafe can be," the reporter wrote. "In an age of identical chain coffee shops, Sweet Memories offers something increasingly rare: authenticity and genuine connection." I sent the article to both my children. Olivia called immediately, bubbling with pride. Tyler sent another text. "Nice article. Congrats." As the second location found its footing, I began working on the next phase of my plan, packaged goods for retail. I started small. Our most popular cookie varieties packaged in distinctive tins with story cards tucked inside. Through a customer connection, I secured shelf space in 3 specialty food shops, testing the market's response. The cookies sold out within days. We increased production, adding more varieties, expanding to more stores. Each package featured our distinctive logo, a vintage teacup with steam forming the shape of an open book, and the tagline, "Every bite tells a story." 2.5 years after Frank had left me with a patronizing pat on the hand, I was running 2 successful cafes and a growing wholesale business. My staff had expanded to 15 people across both locations, with Miguel promoted to head baker and Jade managing the original cafe. I had health insurance, a small but growing retirement account, and something I hadn't anticipated, a reputation as a savvy businesswoman. The local Chamber of Commerce invited me to speak at their small business development luncheon. The community college asked if I would guest lecture for their culinary entrepreneurship course. A regional business magazine included me in their Women to Watch feature. Through it all, Tyler and Natalie's absence was a persistent ache. They had visited the original cafe exactly twice in the past year and hadn't yet seen the second location. Holiday gatherings had become exercises in scheduling conflicts and last-minute cancellations. When we did manage to be in the same room, conversation was superficial, focused on safe topics like weather and generic news items. The real breaking point came during Thanksgiving of the 3rd year. I had invited them to my apartment for dinner, nothing elaborate, just family time. The day before, Tyler called. "Mom, I'm really sorry, but we can't make it tomorrow. Natalie's boss invited us to his lake house for the weekend. It's a huge opportunity for her. The executive team will be there." I gripped the phone tightly. "Tyler, it's Thanksgiving. We haven't had a family dinner in months." "I know, and I feel terrible. But this could mean a promotion for Nat. We'll make it up to you, I promise." After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by ingredients for the meal I'd planned to cook, and allowed myself to feel the full weight of their rejection. This wasn't just about a missed holiday dinner. This was a pattern, a clear message about where I ranked in their priorities. The next day, instead of cooking for one, I boxed up the ingredients and took them to the original cafe, where I hosted an impromptu Thanksgiving for staff members who had nowhere else to go. Miguel brought his boyfriend, Jade came with her roommate, and 3 of our part-time employees joined us. We cooked together in the cafe kitchen, shared stories around pushed-together tables, and created a new tradition that felt more genuine than any stilted family obligation. As we were cleaning up, Jade cornered me by the dishwasher. "Your son's an idiot," she said bluntly, her purple hair now streaked with teal. "No offense, but anyone who'd skip your Thanksgiving dinner for some corporate schmooze fest doesn't deserve your pumpkin pie." I laughed despite myself. "It's complicated. His wife is controlling and status-obsessed," Jade finished for me. "Yeah, we've all met her. The way she looks around the cafe like she's afraid to catch middle-class cooties." "That's my daughter-in-law you're describing," I reminded her, though without much conviction. Jade shrugged. "Doesn't make it less true. You've built something amazing here, Mary. Something real. Some people just can't recognize value unless it comes with a designer label." Her words stayed with me as I continued expanding the business. By the 4th year, we had added a 3rd cafe location, and our packaged goods were in 27 stores across the state. I had hired a small business consultant to help manage the growth, a sharp-eyed woman named Diane, who took one look at my operations and declared them impressively organized but ready for next-level systems. Under Diane's guidance, I streamlined production, improved inventory management, and developed a training program to ensure consistent quality across all locations. We created a proper website with online ordering capabilities and a blog where I shared the stories behind our most popular items. "You've got something special here," Diane told me during one of our strategy sessions. "Your margins are healthy, your concept is unique, and your customer loyalty is off the charts. Have you thought about franchising?" I hadn't, but the idea took root. What if Sweet Memories could grow beyond what I could personally oversee? What if the concept of food with meaning, of desserts with stories, could spread to other communities? As I approached the 5th anniversary of the original cafe's opening, I made another decision. It was time to formalize the business structure. With the help of a business attorney, I created Sweet Memories Enterprises, LLC, with myself as CEO and principal owner. I offered small equity stakes to Miguel and Jade, acknowledging their contributions to our success. The day I signed the incorporation papers, I called Tyler again, hoping to share this milestone. When Natalie answered, her voice was cool and detached. "He's in a meeting, Mary. I'll have him call you back." He didn't call back. Instead, I received another text later that evening. "Sorry I missed your call. Congrats on the business stuff. Heading to Chicago tomorrow for a conference. Talk soon." That night, I opened a bottle of wine and sat on my small balcony, contemplating the strange paradox of my life. Professionally, I was more successful than I'd ever dreamed possible. I had created something meaningful from nothing, proved my capabilities to myself and others, and built financial security on my own terms. Yet personally, I was losing my son inch by inch, day by day. Each achievement seemed to push him further away, as if my success was somehow a threat or a rebuke. Natalie's influence was obvious, but Tyler was a grown man making his own choices that increasingly excluded me from their lives. As I sipped my wine and watched the city lights flicker to life against the darkening sky, I made a promise to myself. I would continue building my life and my business with joy and purpose, regardless of their approval. I would keep the door open for Tyler, but I would no longer diminish myself to fit through the increasingly narrow space they allowed me in their world. Frank had been wrong. I wasn't fine in the passive, diminished way he had imagined. I was thriving, growing, evolving, becoming more fully myself with each passing day, and no one, not even my own son, would make me feel small again. By year 5, Sweet Memories had become something I barely could have imagined when I signed that first lease. We now had 4 cafe locations across Portland, a commercial kitchen facility for our wholesale production, and a small but dedicated office staff handling operations, marketing, and distribution. Our packaged goods line had expanded to include seasonal gift collections, corporate gift programs, and a subscription service that delivered story boxes monthly to customers nationwide, each containing assorted treats and their accompanying narratives. The Sweet Memories cookbook, featuring 50 recipes and their histories, had been published by a regional press and was in its 3rd printing. What had begun as a single woman's post-divorce reinvention had evolved into a multi-million-dollar enterprise employing over 40 people. Industry publications had taken notice, featuring us in articles about innovative food businesses and customer experience trends. A national morning show had even included us in a segment about businesses with heart. Through it all, I remained hands-on, not micromanaging, but preserving the soul of what made Sweet Memories special. I still developed new recipes, still wrote the story cards, still made appearances at each location to connect with customers and staff. Money had never been my primary motivation. Creating something meaningful was what drove me. The irony wasn't lost on me that as my business family grew closer and more supportive, my relationship with Tyler and Natalie continued to deteriorate. We were down to exchanging obligatory birthday and Christmas texts, with occasional stilted phone calls that never lasted more than 5 minutes. I hadn't seen them in person for nearly 18 months, despite living in the same city. Olivia remained my steadfast supporter, visiting regularly from Seattle and cheering each new achievement. During one such visit, as we shared wine in my new condo, a significant upgrade from my post-divorce apartment, she finally addressed the elephant in the room. "Have you thought about just confronting them?" she asked bluntly. "Asking Tyler directly why he's cut you out of his life?" I swirled the Cabernet in my glass, watching it catch the light. Many times. But what would that accomplish? He'd make excuses, Natalie would manufacture scheduling conflicts, and nothing would change. Or maybe he'd have to face what he's doing, Olivia countered. Maybe he doesn't even realize how much he's hurt you. "He knows," I said softly. "He chooses to ignore it because acknowledging it would mean either changing his behavior or admitting he's prioritizing Natalie's social climbing over his relationship with his mother. Neither option appeals to him." Olivia shook her head. "I don't understand what happened to him. We weren't raised to be this way." "Status happened," I replied. "Natalie's vision of the perfect life happened, and I don't fit that vision, especially now that I'm a reminder of what can be accomplished without the trappings they're killing themselves to maintain." The truth was, through business connections and Portland's relatively small social circles, I'd heard things about Tyler and Natalie's situation. They had purchased a house in West Hills that stretched their finances to the breaking point. Natalie drove a new luxury SUV, replaced every 2 years. They took lavish vacations they couldn't afford and joined clubs with steep membership fees. The image was immaculate. The reality, from what I gathered, was a house of cards built on credit card debt and financial stress. My success only highlighted the contrast between substance and appearance, between creating genuine value and maintaining expensive facades. No wonder they kept their distance. My very existence had become an implicit critique of their choices. In the 6th year, an unexpected opportunity arose. A wealthy customer who had become a regular at our original location approached me after hours one day, introduced himself as James Whitaker, and made a surprising proposal. "I have a property in Naples, Florida," he explained, settling into one of our vintage chairs. "Beachfront, spectacular views. Been in my family for generations, but none of my kids want it. Too far from their lives in New York and LA." I nodded politely, wondering where this was going. "I've been thinking about selling, but the right buyer matters to me. This morning, enjoying your lavender shortbread and reading its story about your grandmother's garden, I had a thought." He leaned forward. "Have you ever considered expanding to Florida?" The idea was so unexpected I laughed. "Florida? That's quite a leap from Portland." "Hear me out," he continued. "Naples has a demographic that would appreciate what you've created here. People with the means and inclination to value quality and storytelling. The property includes a small commercial space that would be perfect for a cafe, plus living quarters above, private beach access, spectacular sunsets." "Sounds lovely, but also sounds expensive," I replied practically. "It is," he acknowledged with a smile. "But I'm not just looking to sell. I'm looking to invest. I'd be interested in becoming a silent partner in a Sweet Memories Florida expansion, with the property as part of my investment." He handed me his card, James Whitaker, Whitaker Investments. A quick internet search later that evening revealed he was not just wealthy, but enormously so, having built and sold 3 technology companies before semi-retiring to manage his investment portfolio. Over the next 2 months, we developed the concept together. A flagship Sweet Memories location in Naples, with potential for further expansion throughout Florida if the concept translated successfully to the new market. James would provide the property and additional capital as a minority partner. I would maintain controlling interest and management authority. The business case was sound, the opportunity exceptional, but the decision meant dividing my time between Portland and Florida, at least initially, until the new location was established. It meant stepping further away from day-to-day operations in Portland, trusting my team to maintain our standards and culture. "You've built a strong organization, Diane," my business consultant assured me when I shared my concerns. "Your systems are solid. Your team is capable. This is the natural next step for a founder, learning to lead from a higher level while preserving the essence of what makes the business special." After careful consideration and extensive discussions with my leadership team, I signed the partnership agreement with James. At 64, I was embarking on a bi-coastal expansion of the business I'd built from the ashes of my divorce. The irony of establishing a base in Florida, the stereotypical retirement destination, while actively growing my company, was not lost on me. The Naples location took 8 months to complete. I traveled back and forth regularly, overseeing renovations, hiring staff, adapting our concept to the new market while maintaining its essential character. The space was stunning, airy and elegant, with panoramic Gulf views and expansive outdoor seating area. The living quarters above, which would become my Florida residence, were equally impressive, open and light-filled, with a private terrace overlooking the water. For the grand opening, Olivia flew in from Seattle, bringing her fiancé Meredith, whom I'd met several times before. James Whitaker attended with his wife, both beaming with pride as if they'd discovered a rare talent. Local media covered the event, highlighting the unique concept and my journey from divorced schoolteacher to expanding entrepreneur. I sent Tyler and Natalie an invitation, though I had few expectations. Sure enough, the day before the opening, I received a text. "Congratulations on the new location. Unfortunately, we can't make it to Florida on such short notice. Good luck tomorrow." Short notice. I had sent the invitation 6 weeks earlier. The Naples Cafe was an immediate success, connecting with both year-round residents and seasonal visitors who appreciated our blend of quality and narrative. The Snowbird clientele began spreading the word back in their northern home communities, creating a network of ambassadors for our brand that extended far beyond Florida. By the 7-year mark after opening my first cafe, Sweet Memories had become a thriving enterprise with 5 Portland locations, the Naples flagship, a robust wholesale business, and a growing e-commerce platform. I divided my time between Oregon and Florida, spending winters in the sunshine and summers in the Pacific Northwest, leading a company that employed nearly 60 people and generated annual revenues approaching $8 million. I had long since stopped expecting Tyler and Natalie to acknowledge or celebrate these milestones. The distance between us had calcified into a painful but familiar absence, punctuated only by perfunctory holiday acknowledgments and the occasional family update relayed through Olivia. Which is why, on a brilliant April morning as I enjoyed coffee on my Gulf View terrace in Naples, I was completely unprepared for the sight of a rental car pulling into my driveway. Even less prepared for Tyler to emerge from the driver's side, helping a visibly pregnant Natalie from the passenger seat. 7 years of estrangement, of missed birthdays and holidays, of declined invitations and ignored achievements. 7 years of building a life and business they had dismissively labeled a hobby. 7 years of growing accustomed to their absence. And now they stood at my door, unannounced, with practiced smiles and calculating eyes, taking in the expansive beachfront property that represented everything they had never believed I could achieve. "Mom," Tyler called, waving as if we'd seen each other last week. "Surprise! We were hoping we could talk to you about something important." I set down my coffee cup with deliberate care, taking a deep breath to center myself before rising to greet them. Whatever had brought them to my door after all this time, I knew with absolute certainty it wasn't a sudden desire to repair our relationship. People don't cross the country unannounced for reconciliation. They come when they want something. And as I descended the stairs to my front entrance, I steeled myself for whatever calculation had finally made me worth acknowledging in their carefully curated lives. "Mom, this place is incredible," Tyler gushed as I led them through the front door into the airy living room with its panoramic Gulf views. "We had no idea your business had grown so substantial." Had no idea because they'd never bothered to ask, never read the articles I'd been featured in, never visited any of the locations beyond the original cafe, and even then, only twice in 7 years. "Thank you," I replied simply, gesturing for them to sit. "This is quite a surprise. You should have called ahead. I might have been in Portland." Natalie lowered herself carefully onto my white linen sofa, one hand resting protectively on her rounded belly. Her designer maternity dress probably cost more than what I paid my cafe managers weekly. "We wanted to surprise you," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, "and see the Florida location everyone's talking about." Everyone. As if they'd been hearing about my success through mutual social circles rather than deliberately avoiding any acknowledgement of it. "How far along are you?" I asked, nodding toward her stomach. 5 months, Tyler answered quickly. "It's a boy. We're thinking of naming him Alexander. A grandson. I would be a grandmother, and they hadn't even told me about the pregnancy until now, halfway through. The realization stung, but I kept my expression neutral. "Congratulations. That's wonderful news." An awkward silence fell. 7 years of distance had left us without the easy rhythms of normal family conversation. I waited, knowing they hadn't flown across the country simply to share pregnancy news that could have been delivered by phone. "So," Tyler finally continued, glancing around the room with obvious appreciation, "we had no idea you were doing so well. The Naples location, the beachfront property, you've really built something impressive, Mom." "Thank you," I said again, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Natalie leaned forward slightly. "We've been following your success from afar. Tyler always said you had a good business sense. A revision of history so blatant it was almost laughable. And now, with the baby coming, we've been thinking about family a lot, about connections, about new beginnings." There it was, the preamble to whatever they actually wanted. "New beginnings," I echoed, keeping my tone neutral. Tyler nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. We've been so caught up in our careers, our lives in Portland. We've let too much time pass without proper family connection. 7 years, I said quietly. His expression faltered slightly. Has it really been that long? Since we've had a meaningful conversation? Yes. Since you've shown genuine interest in my life? Longer. Natalie jumped in smoothly. Which is exactly why we're here. To reconnect. To make things right before the baby comes. I studied them both. These strangers who shared my blood and name but had chosen to exclude me from their lives until this moment. Tyler looked thinner than I remembered, with new lines around his eyes that spoke of stress. Natalie's polished exterior remained intact, but there was something desperate in her overly bright smile. I appreciate the sentiment, I said carefully, but I'm curious about the timing. Why now? After all these years? They exchanged a quick glance, the kind of wordless communication long-married couples develop. Tyler cleared his throat. Well, with the baby coming, we've been reevaluating our living situation. Our place in Portland is beautiful, but it's not really designed for a family. No yard, too many stairs, not enough space. Now we were approaching the real purpose of their visit. We've been looking at family-friendly options, Natalie continued, her tone carefully modulated. But the Portland market is so competitive right now, and with both of us potentially taking parental leave, the timing is financially challenging. I see, I said, though I didn't yet. Not completely. Were they about to ask for money? A loan? That seemed too direct for their approach. Then we saw the article about your Naples location in that business magazine, Tyler added. The photos of this place. It got us thinking. Florida has great schools, fantastic weather for raising children, no state income tax. You're thinking of moving to Florida? I asked, genuinely surprised. We're considering it, Natalie nodded. Being closer to family, to you, would be wonderful for the baby. For all of us. The pieces were finally coming together, but I still couldn't see their endgame clearly. What exactly were they proposing? And this visit is, what? A reconnaissance mission to see if you like the area? Partly, Tyler admitted, but mostly to see you, to reconnect. We've missed so much time already. The calculation behind their sudden desire for family connection was so transparent, it was almost insulting. 7 years of silence, and now that I had a valuable beachfront property and a successful business, they were suddenly interested in reconnecting, conveniently, just as they were expecting a child and reevaluating their living situation. When we saw this place, Natalie continued, waving her hand to encompass the spacious living room with its ocean view, we couldn't believe it. So much space for just one person. It must get lonely. And there it was. The true purpose of their visit, finally emerging like a shark fin breaking the surface. It's not lonely at all, I replied evenly. I have a fulfilling life here and in Portland. Friends, colleagues, community involvement. My business keeps me quite busy. But it's not family, Tyler pressed, leaning forward earnestly. And with the baby coming, wouldn't it be wonderful to have your grandson growing up nearby? Maybe even in the same house. This place is certainly big enough for all of us. The audacity was breathtaking. 7 years of absence, of missed birthdays and holidays, of dismissing my business as a cute hobby. And now they expected to move into my home because it suited their needs? You want to move in with me? I clarified, making sure I understood exactly what they were proposing. It makes so much sense, Natalie enthused, as if she just suggested something completely reasonable. You have all this space. We need more room for the baby. You'd get to be involved in your grandson's life from day one. We could help with the property maintenance, and you'd have company. Plus, Tyler added, with your business connections in Florida now, you might be able to help us find good positions here. A fresh start for all of us. I looked at them, really looked at them, and saw not just the transparent manipulation, but something deeper and more concerning. The subtle signs of financial strain beneath their polished exterior, the desperation lurking behind their practiced smiles. This wasn't just about wanting a bigger space for their baby. This was about a lifestyle they could no longer sustain. How are things really going in Portland? I asked quietly. Financially, I mean. The question clearly caught them off guard. Tyler's smile faltered, and Natalie's hand tightened on her handbag. We're reassessing our priorities, Tyler said carefully. The housing market, the economy, the baby coming, it's a lot to navigate. We've had some setbacks, Natalie admitted, with obvious reluctance. Tyler's company went through a restructuring, and my client base has been affected by the economic downturn. Translation: one or both of them were likely unemployed or significantly underemployed, their expensive lifestyle was collapsing around them, and they'd suddenly remembered they had a successful relative with a valuable property and business connections. The realization should have made me angry, and part of me was indeed furious at their transparent calculation. But more than anger, what I felt was a profound sadness. How had we come to this? How had my son, the sensitive boy I'd raised, become this man who would appear on my doorstep after 7 years of silence, pregnant wife in tow, expecting to move into my home as if our estrangement had never happened? "Let me be sure I understand," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the emotions churning beneath. "After 7 years of minimal contact, during which you've shown no interest in my life, my business, or my well-being, you've come to suggest moving into my home because you need more space and financial stability for your coming child?" Tyler had the grace to look uncomfortable. "When you put it that way, it sounds terrible. How else would you put it?" I asked simply. Natalie shifted strategy, her eyes suddenly glistening with calculated tears. "We know we've made mistakes. We've been focused on the wrong things, but the baby has changed our perspective. We want to be a family again." Family. The word hung between us, laden with meaning and memory. Family was Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings. Family was showing up for milestones and supporting each other through challenges. Family was not a convenience to be remembered only when needed. I took a deep breath, centering myself before I responded. This moment, I realized, was a crossroads, not just for our relationship, but for my own sense of self-worth. How I responded would define boundaries that should have been established years ago. "Tyler, Natalie," I said, meeting their eyes directly. "I'm genuinely happy about your baby. I look forward to being a grandmother and building a relationship with my grandson." They both relaxed slightly, hope flickering across their faces. "But," I continued, my voice gentle but firm, "you don't have any space here. Not in my home, not in my daily life. That space needs to be earned through consistent presence and genuine care, neither of which you've demonstrated for 7 years." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant sound of waves against the shore. "What do you mean?" Natalie's voice rose an octave, her hand still resting on her stomach, as if the baby inside might shield her from uncomfortable truths. "There are at least 4 bedrooms in this house. We've seen them." I set my coffee cup down carefully. "I'm not talking about physical space, Natalie. I'm talking about space in my life." Tyler's face flushed. "Mom, we're talking about your grandson, your family." "Family," I repeated, letting the word hang in the air between us. "Tell me, when was the last time you treated me like family, Tyler? Was it last Christmas when you promised to call and never did? Perhaps it was my 65th birthday that neither of you acknowledged? Or maybe during my business expansion celebrations that you were always too busy to attend?" The color drained from his face. "That's not fair. We've been busy building our lives, focusing on our careers, which apparently haven't worked out so well," I interrupted, my voice remaining calm despite the emotions churning beneath the surface. "Otherwise, you wouldn't be here asking to move into my home." Tyler stood abruptly. "If you're going to throw our situation in our faces, sit down, Tyler," I said, not unkindly but with unmistakable authority. "I'm not throwing anything in your face. I'm simply acknowledging reality, something this family has avoided for too long." Surprisingly, he sat, looking more like the chastened teenager who had broken curfew than the 37-year-old man he now was. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "No, you cannot move into my home. This is my sanctuary, earned through years of work that you both dismissed as a cute hobby. However, I will help you, but on my terms, not yours." Natalie's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What does that mean?" "It means I'll use my connections to help you find jobs if you're serious about relocating to Florida. It means I'll ensure my grandson has proper medical care by covering those expenses directly. It means I'll establish an education fund for the baby that neither of you can access for any other purpose. You think we'd steal from our own child?" Natalie's indignation was theatrical. "I think you're desperate, and desperate people make poor choices," I replied evenly. "But what I know for certain is that you don't get to ignore me for 7 years and then claim rights to my home, my wealth, or my daily life without earning back a place in my heart. Tyler's expression was a complex mixture of shame, anger, and something else. Perhaps respect. We're not asking for handouts. Yes, you are, I corrected him gently. And it's okay to need help sometimes. What's not okay is to only value people when you need something from them. The harsh truth hung in the air between us. 7 years of accumulated hurts, misunderstandings, and deliberate distancing couldn't be erased with one convenient reunion driven by financial necessity. So that's it? Natalie's voice had taken on the sharp edge I remembered from years ago. After everything Tyler's done for you? I couldn't help but laugh. What exactly has Tyler done for me in the past 7 years, Natalie? Please, enlighten me. Her mouth opened and closed without producing a sound. Tyler stared at the floor. That's what I thought, I said, rising from my chair. Now, if you'd like my help finding employment and ensuring proper care for my grandson, I'm happy to discuss that further. If you came expecting to move in and be financially supported, then we have nothing more to talk about. What happened next surprised me. Tyler, my conflict-avoidant son, who had spent his entire marriage deferring to Natalie's stronger personality, suddenly stood and walked to the window overlooking the Gulf. She's right, Nat, he said quietly, his back to us. We can't just show up after all this time and expect her to take us in. Natalie's face registered shock. Tyler, your mother clearly doesn't understand our situation. Our situation, he interrupted, turning to face her, is that we've been living beyond our means for years, racking up debt trying to maintain appearances. Our situation is that we've been evicted from our house and maxed out our credit cards. Our situation is that we've spent so much time chasing status that we've forgotten what actually matters. I watched this exchange with growing astonishment. This was not the son I'd watched fade from my life, the man who let his wife dictate the terms of his family relationships. And now, he continued, his voice gaining strength, we show up at my mother's door, a woman we've effectively ignored for 7 years, expecting her to solve our problems. Can you blame her for saying no? Natalie's eyes filled with tears, whether from genuine emotion or tactical manipulation, I couldn't tell. I'm pregnant, Tyler. What are we supposed to do? What everyone else does, I interjected calmly. You work, you budget, you make sacrifices, you build a life within your means. Tyler ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that it momentarily took my breath away. Mom's right. We need to stand on our own feet. The look Natalie gave him could have frozen the Gulf of Mexico in July. Stand on our own feet? In case you've forgotten, we're unemployed, homeless, and expecting a baby. Your mother is living in luxury while we're facing ruin. A luxury I earned, I reminded her quietly, through a business you both mocked. For a moment, the only sound was the gentle lapping of waves against the shore and the distant call of seagulls. Then Tyler did something I never expected. He reached for my hand. I'm sorry, Mom, he said, his voice breaking slightly. For everything. For the distance, for dismissing your business, for showing up like this. You deserved better from me. The simple apology, delivered without excuses or qualifications, caught me completely off guard. In all our years of strained relations, Tyler had never acknowledged his role in our estrangement so directly. I can't speak for Natalie, he continued, glancing at his silent wife, but I'd like a chance to rebuild our relationship, not because we need your help, though we do, but because I've missed you, because I want my son to know his grandmother. Because I've been wrong for years, and I'm only now beginning to understand how wrong. I studied my son's face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. What I saw instead was genuine remorse mingled with a new resolve. The first glimpses, perhaps, of the man he could become if freed from the endless pursuit of appearances. That, I said quietly, is a beginning I can work with. Natalie remained silent, her expression unreadable as she watched this exchange. Whether she would join Tyler in this tentative reconciliation or resist it remained to be seen. But for the first time in 7 years, I felt a cautious hope that my relationship with my son might be salvageable. Not because of financial necessity, but because he had finally begun to see the hollow core of the life they had constructed. The path ahead would not be easy or straightforward. Trust, once broken, requires more than words to repair. But as I looked at Tyler, really looked at him, I saw not just the man who had disappointed me, but glimpses of the boy I had raised, emerging from years of choices that had led him far from his true self. "Let's start with lunch," I suggested. The simple invitation and offering of neither rejection nor immediate reconciliation, but something more measured and real. A chance to begin again, with eyes wide open and expectations firmly grounded in reality. The next few days unfolded with cautious navigation of our new reality. I helped Tyler and Natalie check into a modest hotel nearby, not the luxury resort they might have expected, but a clean, comfortable place they could afford for a short stay. We agreed to meet daily, to talk openly, to begin the slow process of understanding what had happened to our relationship and whether it could be rebuilt. Natalie remained largely withdrawn, participating in our conversations with minimal engagement, her resentment at the rejection of their plan barely concealed beneath a veneer of polite cooperation. Tyler, however, surprised me with his growing candor, as if some internal dam had broken when he finally acknowledged the truth of their situation. On our third afternoon together, sitting on my terrace overlooking the Gulf, he painted a clearer picture of how they had arrived at this desperate juncture. "We were living on credit for years," he admitted, staring into his iced tea. "The house payment was almost 60% of our take-home pay, but Natalie insisted we needed the right address, the right schools nearby for when we had children. And you went along with it," I observed, not accusingly, but seeking understanding. He nodded. "It seemed important at the time. Her family, they judge everything by appearances. Her father made it clear he considered me barely acceptable as a son-in-law. I wanted to prove I could provide the lifestyle she was accustomed to, even when you couldn't afford it. Especially then." He gave a humorless laugh. "The more we struggled, the more important it became to maintain the illusion. New cars we leased rather than owned, vacations charged to credit cards, club memberships we couldn't afford. It was exhausting, and I didn't fit into that illusion," I said quietly. Tyler had the grace to look ashamed. "A divorced former teacher starting a cute little bakery? No, you didn't fit Natalie's narrative of our successful, sophisticated lives. And I let her dictate the terms of our relationship with you, because it was easier than fighting another battle." The honest acknowledgement hurt, but it was also strangely healing. The truth, however painful, providing a foundation that platitudes and excuses never could. "When did things start to fall apart?" I asked. "About 18 months ago. I lost my job in a corporate restructuring. I found another position, but at a significantly lower salary. Then Natalie's real estate business took a hit when the market cooled. We tried to maintain the same lifestyle, just with a lot more debt." He shook his head. "The foreclosure notice came 3 months ago. We managed to sell the house before it went to auction, but after paying off the mortgage and other debts, we had almost nothing left. And then Natalie got pregnant. It wasn't planned," he admitted. "But once it happened, it felt like a sign that we needed to change our lives. To be honest, Mom, we were desperate. When we saw that article about your Naples location with pictures of this house, it seemed like a miracle solution." The vulnerability in his confession touched me. This was my son, not the polished professional who had kept me at arm's length for years, but the boy I had raised, finally emerging from behind the facade he and Natalie had constructed. "What does Natalie think about all this?" I asked, glancing toward the beach where she was taking a solitary walk, her figure small against the vast expanse of sand and sea. Tyler sighed. "She's angry, humiliated, scared. She grew up with wealth and status. Losing it feels like failing at the only game that matters in her world. And you? What matters in your world now?" He considered the question seriously, perhaps for the first time. "Stability, honesty, being a good father to my son, rebuilding relationships that matter, like ours." He hesitated. "Building a life based on what we can actually afford rather than what impresses other people." Over the following week, I made good on my promise to help them find employment opportunities. Through James Whitaker, I arranged an interview for Tyler with a property management company that handled several upscale communities in the area. His sales background and personable nature made him a strong candidate for their leasing division. For Natalie, the path was more complicated. Her real estate license didn't transfer directly to Florida, and her attitude remained a barrier to the kind of humble restart their situation required. When I suggested a position as an assistant manager at one of my cafes, a role that would provide steady income while she studied for her Florida real estate exam, her response was predictably frosty. "I have 15 years of experience in luxury property sales," she said stiffly. "I'm not serving coffee and pastries. You'd be managing a team of 12 people and handling operations for a location that generates over $1 million in annual revenue." I corrected her. "Not exactly serving coffee. It's still beneath my qualifications." "Perhaps," I acknowledged, "but it's a position that's actually available to you right now, with health benefits that would cover your pregnancy and maternity leave. Sometimes we need to take a step backward to move forward again." She didn't respond, but I could see the internal struggle playing out across her face, pride warring with practical necessity. The breakthrough, when it came, was unexpected. I had invited them to the Naples Cafe one morning before opening hours, wanting Tyler to see the operation firsthand before his property management interview later that day. As Miguel, now my executive chef who traveled between locations, was giving them a tour of the kitchen, a young woman approached Natalie. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly. "Are you Natalie Sullivan? You sold my parents their condo in Portland about 6 years ago." Natalie straightened, automatically switching into her professional persona. "Yes, the Riverside property? How are your parents enjoying it?" "They loved it. Actually, they've retired here to Naples now." The young woman smiled. "I manage the social media for Sweet Memories. When I saw you, I thought I recognized you from their closing." This coincidental connection, this small world moment, seemed to shift something in Natalie. Being recognized for her professional past, being reminded of her successes rather than her current failures, softened her defensive posture. Later that afternoon, after returning from his interview, which had gone well, Tyler found me in my home office. "Natalie's been thinking about your job offer," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "She has some ideas about expanding the cafe's catering services to target the luxury condo market. Apparently she met someone today who made her see some possibilities. Does that mean she's considering accepting the position?" "I think so," he nodded. "On her terms, of course. Natalie doesn't do anything without negotiating." I smiled despite myself. Of course not. That evening, as we shared dinner on my terrace, the first meal that had felt genuinely comfortable since their arrival, I made another decision, not out of obligation or manipulation, but from a place of cautious hope. "I've been thinking," I said as we finished our meal. "There's a small guest cottage on the property, just beyond the garden. It has 2 bedrooms, its own kitchen, separate entrance. It would need some updating, but—" I met Tyler's eyes directly. "If you both find stable employment here, if you're serious about rebuilding our relationship, you could stay there, temporarily, while you get on your feet." The offer hung in the air between us, not the full integration into my home and life they had initially expected, but a compromise that offered both proximity and appropriate boundaries. "That's incredibly generous," Tyler said quietly. "Thank you." Natalie nodded, her expression still guarded, but with a new hint of humility. "It would give us time to establish ourselves here, to prove we're serious about making changes." "That's the idea," I confirmed. "Not a rescue, but a bridge to your own stability, with clear expectations on all sides." As the sun set over the Gulf, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson, I felt a cautious optimism take root. The path ahead would not be easy or straightforward. Trust, once broken, requires more than words and temporary gratitude to repair. But for the first time in 7 years, I could envision a future that included my son, his wife, and my soon-to-arrive grandson. Not on their terms or even entirely on mine, but on new terms we would negotiate together, with honest acknowledgement of the past and clear-eyed awareness of what healthy boundaries required. Frank had been wrong about so many things when he left me, but perhaps most wrong in his assumption that my story was ending just as the most interesting chapters were beginning to unfold. The renovation of the guest cottage became a litmus test for our fragile new beginning. I hired contractors for the major work, updating the bathroom, replacing the outdated kitchen appliances, repairing the roof, but suggested that Tyler and Natalie handle the cosmetic improvements themselves, painting, minor repairs, decorating within a reasonable budget I provided. "Sweat equity," I explained when Tyler looked surprised at my stipulation. "It's important that you invest yourselves in creating your new home, not just have it handed to you." Initially, Natalie balked at the idea of manual labor. "I've never painted a room in my life," she admitted with characteristic bluntness. Perfect time to learn, I replied mildly. YouTube has excellent tutorials. What I didn't say, what didn't need saying, was that this process would reveal whether they were truly committed to changing the patterns that had led to their current situation. Would they approach this opportunity with entitlement and resentment, or with gratitude and effort? The answer would shape our path forward. To my cautious optimism, they rose to the challenge. Tyler threw himself into the work with unexpected enthusiasm, revealing a knack for practical repairs I hadn't known he possessed. Dad never let me help with household projects, he explained when I commented on his surprisingly competent plumbing repair. He always said it was faster to do it himself than teach me. More surprising was Natalie's gradual engagement. She began by supervising from a careful distance, clipboard in hand, but eventually donned old clothes and joined the painting efforts, her perfectionism channeled into making sure every stroke was flawless. By the third week, she had created detailed design boards for each room, working within the modest budget with creativity I hadn't expected from someone who had previously equated quality exclusively with price. Meanwhile, their professional lives were taking shape. Tyler had secured the position with the property management company, starting at a middle management level with promise for advancement. The work suited him, people-oriented, varied, with clear metrics for success, but without the cutthroat corporate culture he'd become accustomed to. Natalie's journey was more complex. After several days of evident internal struggle, she accepted the assistant manager position at the Naples Cafe, approaching it with the same determination she'd previously applied to luxury real estate. To everyone's surprise, perhaps especially her own, she excelled in the role. She has an eye for detail and systems that's remarkable, Miguel reported after her first month. She's already streamlined our catering ordering process and identified 3 inefficiencies in our inventory management. And the staff? I asked, knowing Natalie's imperious tendencies could clash with our carefully cultivated workplace culture. Rocky at first, he admitted. But she's learning. That humility workshop you suggested for the management team came at the perfect time. I had indeed scheduled the workshop strategically, framing it as professional development for all location managers rather than intervention specifically for Natalie. The facilitator, a skilled executive coach who had worked with my leadership team before, understood the subtext without it being explicitly stated. Your daughter-in-law has tremendous potential, she told me privately afterward. Beneath the defensive armor is a woman with exceptional intelligence and drive. She just needs to stop equating vulnerability with weakness. True transformation, I was learning, rarely follows a straight line. There were setbacks alongside the progress, days when Natalie retreated into cold efficiency to mask her discomfort at taking direction from people she would previously have considered beneath her notice. Moments when Tyler slipped back into conflict-avoidant patterns, deferring to her mood swings rather than maintaining the healthier balance they were struggling to establish. Our family dinners, now a weekly ritual, became a barometer for their progress. Some evenings were marked by genuine conversation and surprising moments of connection. Others featured Natalie's tight-lipped responses and Tyler's anxious attempts to smooth ruffled feathers. But unlike the past, we were actually showing up, actually trying, actually acknowledging the elephant in the room when tensions arose. I don't know how to do this, Natalie admitted during one particularly honest conversation as her pregnancy advanced into the 3rd trimester. My family never discussed problems directly. We just pretended everything was fine while judging each other mercilessly, behind closed doors. That explains a lot, I observed, not unkindly. She smiled ruefully. I suppose it does. The cottage was completed a month before her due date, transformed from a neglected caretaker's residence into a charming, comfortable home that reflected both practicality and care. The day they officially moved in from their temporary hotel accommodations, I presented them with a housewarming gift, a handmade quilt for the baby's room, crafted by a local artisan who supplied decorative textiles for my cafes. It tells a story, I explained, showing them how each panel depicted a different scene from coastal life. Dolphins playing in the waves, pelicans soaring above mangroves, turtles making their way to the sea. So Alexander will grow up knowing he's part of something larger than himself, connected to this place and its natural rhythms. Natalie ran her fingers over the intricate stitching, her expression softening in a way I rarely witnessed. It's beautiful, she said quietly. Thank you. That evening, sitting alone on my terrace, I reflected on the unexpected journey of the past 2 months. When Tyler and Natalie had first appeared on my doorstep, I had seen only their transparent calculation, their sudden convenient interest in family connection. I had expected nothing but manipulation and entitlement, and had steeled myself accordingly. What I hadn't anticipated was the possibility of genuine change, halting and imperfect certainly, but real nonetheless. Watching my son rediscover his voice and confidence, seeing my daughter-in-law struggle with humility and occasionally succeed, I found myself hoping for what had seemed impossible just weeks earlier: a functional, if complicated, family relationship. The true test came unexpectedly at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, 3 weeks before Natalie's due date. My phone's insistent ringing pulled me from deep sleep. "Mom?" Tyler's voice was tight with panic. "Natalie's water broke. We're heading to the hospital now." "I'll meet you there," I said, already reaching for clothes. Would you come get us instead?" Natalie asked for you specifically. The request, from Natalie, not just Tyler, was so unexpected it momentarily left me speechless. "Of course, I'll be there in 5 minutes." What followed was a night of intense vulnerability. Natalie, stripped of her careful composure by pain and fear, gripping my hand alongside Tyler's as contractions intensified. The careful barriers she had maintained, even during our recent thaw, crumbled in the face of childbirth's raw reality. "I'm scared," she admitted, in a rare moment of complete honesty between contractions. "What if I'm a terrible mother? What if I do to Alexander what my parents did to me?" "You won't," I assured her, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. "Because you're aware of the risk. Because you're already asking the right questions. How can you be so sure?" Her eyes, usually guarded, were wide with genuine fear. "How can you even trust me with your grandson after how I've treated you?" "Because people can change," I said simply. "I'm living proof of that. 7 years ago, I was a recently divorced teacher, starting over at an age when most people are winding down. Now I'm running a multi-state business. Change is possible when we're willing to do the work." A contraction overtook her before she could respond, but the look she gave me contained something I'd never seen from her before: respect untainted by calculation or resentment. Alexander James Sullivan was born at 5:43 a.m., healthy and perfect with a full head of dark hair and his father's chin. As I watched Tyler hold his son for the first time, tears streaming unashamedly down his face, I felt a completion of some cosmic circle. Life continuing despite our human complications, offering new beginnings when we least expect them. When the nurse placed Alexander in my arms, introducing me as grandma for the first time, the love that surged through me was overwhelming. This small, perfect being connected us all now, creating a bond that transcended the mistakes and misunderstandings of the past. Looking at his tiny face, I made a silent promise. This child would grow up in a family that valued authenticity over appearances, substance over status, and the complicated truth of love over the convenient fiction of perfection. Later, as dawn broke over the Gulf, I stood at the hospital room window, watching the first light touch the water. Alexander sleeping peacefully in the bassinet beside Natalie's bed, Tyler dozing in a chair nearby. In this moment of quiet wonder, I felt profound gratitude for the unexpected plot twists of my life story, the painful endings that had led to new beginnings, the challenges that had revealed strength I never knew I possessed. Frank had been so very wrong. My life hadn't ended with our marriage, or with age, or with retirement. It had simply been waiting for me to claim it fully on my own terms, writing new chapters more authentic and satisfying than anything that had come before. Alexander's arrival created a seismic shift in our family dynamics. The theoretical grandson, who had been used as leverage in that first uncomfortable conversation, became a real, breathing person. A tiny human with needs and expressions that captivated us all. The abstraction of family connection transformed into the concrete reality of 3 a.m. feedings, diaper changes, and the particular cry that only Natalie could soothe. I had expected to be a somewhat distant grandmother, involved but maintaining the careful boundaries I'd established when Tyler and Natalie first appeared on my doorstep. Instead, I found myself drawn into the intimate circle of Alexander's care in ways that surprised us all. "Would you mind taking him for a few hours?" Natalie asked when Alexander was barely 2 weeks old, her exhaustion evident in the dark circles beneath her eyes. I haven't showered in 3 days, and Tyler has that property showing he can't reschedule. It was the first time she had asked for my help directly, without Tyler as intermediary. The request, natural between most mothers and grandmothers, felt momentous given our history. Of course, I replied, already reaching for my grandson. Take as long as you need. We'll be fine. Those few hours stretched into a regular arrangement. 2 afternoons a week, I would care for Alexander while Natalie returned to work part-time at the cafe, gradually increasing her hours as she adapted to balancing motherhood and career. The schedule benefited everyone. Alexander received loving attention. Natalie maintained her professional identity while recovering physically, and I developed a relationship with my grandson that was uniquely mine. Most surprising was how this arrangement gradually thawed the remaining ice between Natalie and me. The shared focus on Alexander's well-being created neutral ground where we could interact without the weight of our complicated history constantly pressing down. Small talk about feeding schedules and sleep patterns evolved into more meaningful conversations about parenthood, identity, and the unexpected emotions motherhood had unleashed in her. I never understood my mother until now, she admitted during one such conversation, watching as I gently rocked Alexander to sleep. Her obsession with appearances, with status, I thought it was just shallow materialism. Now I wonder if it was her way of trying to give me security, to make sure I never felt the uncertainty she grew up with. That's often how it works, I agreed. We react to our own upbringing, either repeating it or deliberately doing the opposite. I don't want to repeat my mother's patterns with Alexander. She spoke the words softly, almost to herself. I don't want him growing up thinking his value comes from what he owns or how he looks to others. What do you want for him instead? She considered the question seriously. Confidence, not the fake kind I've been propping up with designer labels and the right address, but real confidence, the kind you have. The observation caught me off guard. Me? You built something from nothing after your divorce. You didn't care what anyone thought about your little bakery because you believed in your vision. When you walk into a room now, people respond to that authentic confidence. She smiled ruefully. It's what I've been faking all these years. The conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. Not friendship exactly, but a mutual respect that hadn't existed before. We were two very different women, with different values and approaches to life. But we both loved the small boy sleeping peacefully in my arms, and increasingly, we recognized valuable qualities in each other. Tyler's transformation was equally remarkable. Fatherhood awakened something essential in him that had been dormant during the years of status chasing and appearance management. He approached parenting with a thoughtful intentionality that reminded me of the sensitive child he had been before the world convinced him that success was measured in square footage and luxury brands. I want to do it differently than Dad did, he told me one evening as we sat on my terrace, watching the sunset while Alexander dozed in his carrier. He was always so focused on achievement, on measurable outcomes. The first question when I brought home a test was never, "What did you learn?" but "What was your score?" Your father valued excellence, I said, trying to be fair to the man who, despite our difficult ending, had been a dedicated parent in his own way. He valued winning, Tyler corrected gently. There's a difference. I don't want Alexander growing up thinking he has to win at everything to be loved. As the weeks passed, I watched my son rediscover values and perspectives that had been buried beneath years of striving for external validation. The property management position, initially accepted out of desperate necessity, revealed itself to be a better fit than his high-pressure corporate career had ever been. He had a natural talent for building relationships, for understanding people's needs and concerns, that flourished in this new environment where success was measured in client satisfaction rather than ruthless competition. I'm being considered for the regional director position, he mentioned casually one Sunday as we prepared dinner together. Another new tradition that had evolved naturally since Alexander's birth. Apparently, I've brought in more new contracts in 6 months than they usually see in a year. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely proud. You seem to really enjoy the work. I do, he agreed, looking somewhat surprised by his own satisfaction. For the first time in my career, I don't feel like I'm constantly performing, constantly proving my worth. I'm just doing good work that comes naturally to me. Natalie's professional evolution was more complicated, but no less significant. The assistant manager position at the cafe, initially accepted with barely concealed resentment, had become a platform for her organizational talents and eye for strategic improvement. She had instituted a corporate catering program that increased weekday revenue by 22%, targeting the very luxury condominiums and businesses she had once sold in her real estate career. "We're getting requests to expand the program to other locations," I told her during our quarterly business review. "The executive team thinks your model could work across all our Florida operations." Pride flickered across her face, not the brittle, status-conscious pride I'd seen in the past, but something more substantive, based on actual achievement rather than appearance. "I'd like to develop a formal proposal for standardizing the program, with some adjustments for local market conditions, of course." "Of course," I agreed, sliding a folder across the desk. "That's why I'm offering you the position of Director of Catering Operations for all Florida locations." She stared at the job description, her expression a complex mixture of surprise, gratification, and wariness. Is this because we're family now?" "No," I said firmly. "It's because you've earned it. The numbers speak for themselves." "Thank you," she said quietly, accepting the folder with careful hands, "for the opportunity, and for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to." The moment was brief but significant, an acknowledgement of how far we had come from that first confrontation when they appeared on my doorstep, expecting to move into my home based on a convenient rediscovery of family ties. 6 months after Alexander's birth, as summer heat gave way to Florida's mild autumn, we celebrated his christening in a small ceremony at the local Episcopal church. Olivia flew in from Seattle with her partner Meredith, meeting her nephew for the first time and reconnecting with her brother after years of distance. "I barely recognize you two," she commented during the celebration afterward, watching Tyler and Natalie interact with guests with a natural ease that had replaced their former performance of perfection. "In a good way," she added quickly. "Parenthood changes you," Natalie replied, adjusting the blanket around a sleeping Alexander. "So does bankruptcy, apparently," Olivia quipped, then immediately looked contrite. "Sorry, that was harsh." But Natalie surprised us all by laughing, a genuine, unguarded sound I'd rarely heard from her. "Actually, you're not wrong. Nothing clarifies priorities quite like losing everything you thought defined you." Later that evening, as my expanded family gathered on my terrace for a casual dinner, I surveyed the scene with quiet wonder. Tyler engaged in animated conversation with Meredith about sustainable building practices, Natalie and Olivia comparing notes on a business book they'd both read. Alexander passed from arm to loving arm as the sunset painted us all in golden light. This gathering, relaxed, authentic, without pretense or performance, would have been unimaginable a year earlier. The journey from estrangement to this new, imperfect but genuine connection had been neither straight nor easy. There had been setbacks alongside progress, difficult conversations alongside moments of unexpected grace. But watching them now, I felt profound gratitude for the crisis that had brought them to my door that day. Not because I took pleasure in their difficulties, but because sometimes we need our carefully constructed facades to crumble before we can build something more authentic in their place. As if sensing my thoughts, Tyler caught my eye across the table and raised his glass in a subtle toast only I could see, an acknowledgement of the distance we had traveled and the work still to be done. I returned the gesture, my heart full with the realization that the family I had lost and mourned for 7 years had not returned to me unchanged. Something better had taken its place. A family based not on obligation or appearance, but on growing mutual respect, hard-won honesty, and the shared love of the small boy who had catalyzed our painful but necessary transformation. Alexander's first birthday arrived with the kind of perfect weather that makes Florida's Gulf Coast legendary. Clear blue skies, gentle breezes, and temperatures that seemed custom-ordered for an outdoor celebration. I had offered my beachfront property for the party, and Tyler and Natalie had accepted with a gratitude that felt genuine rather than calculated. Nothing extravagant, Natalie had insisted during the planning, surprising me with her newfound moderation. Just family and close friends. Alexander won't remember it anyway. This philosophy, so different from the status-conscious woman who had once judged value exclusively by price tags and impressions, was yet another marker of her ongoing transformation. The Natalie who had entered my life a year ago would have planned an Instagram-worthy extravaganza designed to provoke envy rather than celebrate a milestone. The party itself was a testament to our evolving family culture. Simple decorations that Tyler had made himself, a homemade cake from Miguel that featured Alexander's favorite flavors rather than photogenic fondant, and gifts chosen for meaning rather than expense. Olivia and Meredith had flown in again, bringing a handcrafted wooden toy from an artisan in Seattle. My gift was a custom children's book featuring Alexander as the main character, exploring the beach and making friends with local wildlife. As I watched my grandson toddle unsteadily across the sand, squealing with delight when the gentle waves touched his feet, I felt a contentment that went beyond ordinary happiness. This moment, this ordinary, precious family moment, had seemed impossible just a year earlier. The journey from estrangement to this new, imperfect but genuine connection felt like a minor miracle. "Penny for your thoughts," James Whitaker said, joining me at the edge of the gathering. My business partner had become a friend over the past year, and I had invited him and his wife to the celebration. "Just reflecting on how much can change in a year," I replied, watching as Tyler scooped Alexander up for another toe dip in the Gulf waters. Indeed. James followed my gaze to where Natalie was arranging the gift table, her movements efficient but relaxed in a way they hadn't been when she first arrived in Florida. "Your family has come a long way." "We have," I agreed, "though we still have a long way to go." The past year had not been without its challenges. There had been disagreements about parenting approaches, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves, difficult conversations about boundaries and expectations. But unlike the surface harmony and underlying resentments that had characterized so many families, including my marriage to Frank, we were learning to address issues directly, to speak uncomfortable truths with compassion rather than accusation. As the party wound down and guests departed, I found myself alone with Tyler in the kitchen, packaging leftover cake for tomorrow. "Thank you for today," he said, carefully wrapping a slice in wax paper. "For everything, really? No thanks needed. He's my grandson. I don't just mean the party," Tyler clarified. "I mean for not giving up on us, for setting boundaries instead of cutting us off completely, for giving us a chance to become better people." The simple sincerity in his voice touched something deep within me. This was my son, not the polished professional who had kept me at arm's length for years, not the desperate man who had appeared on my doorstep with his pregnant wife, but the authentic person emerging from beneath those roles. "You did the work," I reminded him. "Both of you. I just provided some structure and opportunity." "We wouldn't have done the work without the structure," he said thoughtfully. "We needed the wake-up call, the boundaries, the consequences. We worked in companionable silence for a few moments, the rhythmic sound of waves against the shore providing a peaceful backdrop to our conversation. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you," Tyler said finally, his tone hesitant. "Something I've wondered since you turned us away that first day." "What's that?" "Were you ever tempted to just take us in? To give us what we asked for, even knowing how entitled and manipulative we were being?" He met my eyes directly. "I mean, you had the space. You had the resources. It would have been easier than the approach you took." The question surprised me with its insight. "Yes," I admitted after a moment's reflection. "There was a part of me that wanted to just open the door wide and welcome you back without conditions. The mother in me wanted to fix everything for you, make it all better." "Why didn't you?" "Because it wouldn't have been better. Not really. Not in the long run." I folded a napkin carefully, gathering my thoughts. "If I had simply rescued you without requiring any real change, I would have been complicit in the very patterns that led to your crisis. I would have been treating you like children incapable of growth rather than adults who needed to face consequences and make different choices." Tyler nodded slowly. "It would have been enabling rather than helping." "Exactly. And it would have damaged our relationship further, even if it seemed kinder in the moment." I touched his arm gently. "True love sometimes means setting hard boundaries. Saying no can be an act of profound care when yes would prevent necessary growth." The conversation might have continued, but Natalie appeared in the doorway, Alexander sleepy in her arms. "Sorry to interrupt, but this little man is fading fast. We should probably head home." Home. The guest cottage had evolved over the past year from temporary refuge to genuine home, filled with evidences of their changing priorities. Bookshelves rather than expensive electronics, Comfortable furniture designed for family living rather than impressing visitors. Walls adorned with Alexander's handprints and family photos rather than status symbols. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave, I felt a familiar surge of gratitude for the crisis that had brought them to my door that day. Not because I took pleasure in their difficulties, but because sometimes we need our carefully constructed facades to crumble before we can build something more authentic in their place. The next morning, I was surprised by an unexpected visitor. Natalie arrived alone, without Alexander or Tyler, asking if we could talk privately. The request itself was unusual. Typically, she and I interacted with either Tyler or Alexander as buffers. "Is everything okay?" I asked as we settled on the terrace with coffee. "Yes, actually, better than okay." She seemed uncharacteristically nervous, fiddling with her cup. "Yesterday's party got me thinking about the past year, about everything that's changed, and I realized there's something important I've never properly said to you." I waited, giving her space to continue at her own pace. "I'm sorry," she said finally, meeting my eyes directly, "for the years of keeping Tyler away from you, for treating you as if you were irrelevant or embarrassing, for showing up here expecting you to solve our problems without any acknowledgement of how we'd treated you." The straightforward apology, offered without excuses or qualifications, caught me by surprise. In all our months of cautious rapprochement, direct acknowledgement of the past had remained largely unspoken. "What prompted this?" I asked gently. "Watching you with Alexander yesterday, seeing how much he loves you, how naturally you connect with him." She shook her head slightly. "I kept thinking about the years we stole from you with Tyler, the relationship we damaged out of, what? Pride? Insecurity? Status anxiety? It seems so meaningless now. We can't change the past," I said, "but we can choose a different future." "That's just it." She leaned forward earnestly. "I want to make sure you know that I'm committed to that different future, not just because we needed your help or because of Alexander, but because—" She hesitated, searching for words. "Because I respect the woman you are, the business you've built, the way you've handled everything, including us." The admission clearly cost her something in pride, but it was offered without the resentment or calculation that had characterized so many of our earlier interactions. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a great deal to me." "There's something else," she continued, reaching into her bag. "I've been working on this for a while, trying to get it right." She handed me a thick envelope. Inside was a formal business proposal, meticulously researched, professionally presented, with detailed financial projections and implementation timelines. "A Sweet Memories expansion for the luxury senior living market," I read from the cover page. "It's a growing demographic in Florida," Natalie explained, her professional confidence returning as she discussed the business concept. "High-end retirement communities where residents have both the disposable income and the appreciation for quality and narrative that aligns with your brand values." I paged through the proposal, impressed despite myself. She had identified 3 potential partner facilities, outlined staffing and operational requirements, and projected revenue streams based on realistic penetration rates. "This is remarkably thorough," I acknowledged. "I've been working on it for 3 months," she admitted. "Researching after Alexander goes to bed, meeting with potential partner facilities during my lunch breaks. Why didn't you bring this through normal channels at work? As director of catering operations, this falls within your purview." She hesitated. "I wanted to present it to you personally, outside the business hierarchy. I wanted you to evaluate it on its merits, not as something from your daughter-in-law." The distinction revealed another aspect of her evolution. A desire to earn recognition through genuine contribution rather than leveraging personal connection. "I'll need time to review it properly," I said, closing the folder. "But my initial impression is very positive. This shows real strategic thinking and alignment with our brand values." Relief and pride flickered across her face. "Thank you for considering it." As she left, I remained on the terrace, contemplating this unexpected development. The proposal itself was impressive, a potentially valuable new revenue stream for Sweet Memories. But more significant was what it represented. Natalie applying her considerable intelligence and drive toward creating value rather than merely acquiring status symbols. Later that week, after thoroughly reviewing the proposal with my executive team, I invited Natalie to a formal meeting at our corporate office. She arrived precisely on time, dressed professionally, but without the designer excess that had once characterized her appearance, carrying a notebook and tablet for presentation. "The executive team has reviewed your senior living market proposal," I began, maintaining a professional tone despite our personal connection. "We're unanimously impressed with both the concept and the detailed implementation plan you've developed." She straightened slightly, clearly pleased but containing her reaction. "We'd like to move forward with a pilot program at Pelican Bay Estates," I continued, "and we'd like you to lead the implementation as Vice President of New Market Development." The promotion, significant both in title and compensation, was a professional acknowledgement of her genuine contribution, not a personal favor from a family member. The distinction mattered to both of us. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady, though her eyes betrayed her emotion. "I appreciate the opportunity and the vote of confidence." "You've earned it," I replied simply. "The numbers and strategy speak for themselves." As our meeting concluded and we walked together toward the exit, she paused before we reached the door. "A year ago, I would have seen this as validation of my worth," she said quietly. "Now I understand it's recognition of work well done. There's a difference." "A profound one," I agreed. In that moment of shared understanding, I realized how far we had all traveled from the desperate confrontation on my doorstep a year earlier. The journey had not been easy or straightforward. There had been setbacks alongside progress, difficult conversations alongside moments of unexpected grace. But watching Natalie walk confidently toward her car, no longer defined by designer labels or status anxiety, but by genuine accomplishment and growing self-awareness, I felt profound gratitude for the crisis that had initiated our painful but necessary transformation. Frank had been so very wrong. My life hadn't ended with our marriage, or with age, or with conventional retirement. It had simply been waiting for me to claim it fully, on my own terms, writing new chapters more authentic and satisfying than anything that had come before. Chapters that now, unexpectedly, included the son I had lost and the daughter-in-law I had never expected to respect. 2 years to the day after Tyler and Natalie had appeared on my doorstep with their desperate plan to move into my home, we gathered on my terrace for a celebratory dinner. The occasion was multifaceted. Alexander's second birthday had passed the week before. Sweet Memories had opened its 20th location, our third in Florida, and Natalie's senior living market initiative had exceeded first-year projections by 38%. "To new beginnings that come from difficult endings," Olivia proposed, raising her glass as the sunset painted the Gulf waters in shades of amber and rose. She had relocated to Tampa 6 months earlier to head up the legal department for a major healthcare system, bringing her and Meredith closer to our evolving family circle. "And to the wisdom to know the difference between enabling and empowering," Tyler added, his gaze meeting mine with understanding that required no further explanation. As we enjoyed the meal Miguel had prepared specially for the occasion, I found myself observing the subtle but profound shifts in our family dynamics. Tyler and Natalie still had their moments of tension, but they had developed healthier ways of navigating disagreements. Their relationship with each other had matured as they individually grew, less codependent, more genuinely supportive. Alexander, now a chattering toddler with his father's thoughtful eyes and his mother's determination, moved confidently between all the adults, secure in the knowledge that he was universally beloved. The contrast between his childhood and what Tyler's might have been, had Frank and I understood healthy boundaries, couldn't have been more stark. After dinner, as we lingered over coffee and the homemade key lime pie that had become my signature dessert, Natalie cleared her throat. "We have something we'd like to discuss with everyone," she began, exchanging glances with Tyler. "A decision we've been considering for a while." I felt a momentary tension, old patterns of wariness resurfacing despite our progress. Olivia must have felt it too. She reached for my hand under the table, a gesture of solidarity. "The lease on the guest cottage is coming up for renewal next month," Tyler continued, "and we've decided not to renew it." A beat of silence followed this announcement. Were they moving back to Portland? Had some new opportunity arisen elsewhere? The possibility of geographic separation after these years of careful rebuilding sent an unexpected pang through my heart. "We've found a place of our own," Natalie explained, perhaps sensing our concern. "A modest house about 15 minutes from here, 3 bedrooms, good school district, reasonable commute for both of us. It's nothing fancy," Tyler added, a note of pride in his voice that had nothing to do with square footage or address prestige. But it's within our means, our actual means, not our aspirational ones. We can afford it on our current salaries while still saving for Alexander's education and our retirement. The responsible financial planning, the priority placed on security rather than appearance, the commitment to living within their actual resources, all represented a fundamental shift from the values that had driven them into crisis 2 years earlier. That's wonderful news, I said sincerely. I'm proud of you both. We couldn't have done it without you, Natalie acknowledged, the admission coming more easily than it once would have. Not just the financial breathing room you gave us with the cottage, but the lessons about what really matters. I just provided structure and opportunity, I reminded her, echoing what I'd told Tyler a year earlier. You did the hard work of changing. Nevertheless, Tyler said, reaching for an envelope on the side table, we wanted to mark this milestone with something meaningful. He handed me the envelope. Inside was not another business proposal or financial document, but a simple card containing a handwritten letter. The penmanship alternated between Tyler's neat script and Natalie's more flowing style, indicating they had written it together. Dear Mom, 2 years ago, we arrived at your door with nothing but desperation, entitlement, and a baby on the way. We expected rescue on our terms. You offered transformation on yours. The easy path would have been to simply take us in, to solve our immediate problems while enabling the patterns that created them. Instead, you chose the harder, braver, more loving path of boundaries and consequences wrapped in genuine support. You modeled for us what we hope to teach Alexander, that true strength comes from authenticity, not appearance, that genuine success is measured in relationships and contribution, not possessions or status, that love sometimes means saying no when yes would be easier but ultimately harmful. As we prepare to move into our own home, one we can truly afford, one that represents values we actually believe in rather than ones we think will impress others, we want you to know that your influence extends far beyond the financial support or business opportunities you've provided. You changed our family story, not by rescuing us, but by refusing to. Not by fixing our problems, but by creating conditions where we could fix them ourselves. Not by pretending the past hadn't happened, but by acknowledging it and moving forward with clear eyes and open hearts. Thank you for being the mother and grandmother our family needed, even when it wasn't what we thought we wanted. With love and gratitude, Tyler and Natalie, I read the letter twice, emotions welling up unexpectedly. The journey of the past 2 years, from estrangement to crisis to this new, hard-won connection, had transformed us all in ways none of us could have anticipated that day on my doorstep. I don't know what to say, I admitted, uncharacteristically at a loss for words. You don't need to say anything, Tyler assured me. We just wanted you to know that we understand now. What you did, why you did it, what it gave us. Even me, Natalie added, with a small, self-deprecating smile. Especially me, perhaps. As the evening continued, conversation flowing easily among us, I found myself reflecting on the strange, unexpected path that had led us here. If Frank hadn't left me for his younger assistant, I might never have started Sweet Memories. If the business hadn't succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, Tyler and Natalie might never have experienced the crisis that forced them to reevaluate their priorities. If I hadn't established clear boundaries when they appeared on my doorstep, we might all be trapped in unhealthy patterns of resentment and dependence rather than this new relationship built on mutual respect and genuine care. Later, after everyone had gone and I sat alone on my terrace watching the stars emerge over the gulf, I thought about the question Tyler had asked me a year earlier. Had I ever been tempted to simply take them in, to give them what they asked for that day? The truth was both simpler and more complex than I had admitted then. Yes, there had been a part of me, the mother who had missed her son desperately during those 7 years of estrangement, that had wanted to swing the door wide open and welcome them back unconditionally. But there had also been the woman I had become during those same 7 years, the entrepreneur who had built a business on hard work and strategic decisions rather than wishful thinking. The individual who had discovered her own worth separate from her roles as wife and mother. The person who had learned through painful experience that genuine love requires honesty, boundaries, and sometimes difficult choices. That woman, the one I had become through divorce, reinvention, and determined self-discovery, had known instinctively that true healing couldn't begin with another rescue or another compromise of my own needs and boundaries. It had to start with truth, however uncomfortable, and proceed through accountability toward authentic connection. Your life ended with his, Frank had told me on the day he left, so confident in his assessment of my limited value and potential. How wonderfully, gloriously wrong he had been. My life hadn't ended with our marriage, or with conventional retirement, or even with the painful estrangement from my son. It had simply been waiting for me to claim it fully, on my own terms, writing chapters more authentic and satisfying than anything that had come before. And now, unexpectedly, those chapters included the son I had feared was lost to me forever, the daughter-in-law I had never expected to respect, and the grandson who represented our family's future. A future built not on appearance or obligation, but on the harder, braver, more rewarding foundation of genuine connection and mutual growth. Frank had been wrong about so many things when he left me with that patronizing pat on the hand, but perhaps his greatest miscalculation had been in failing to recognize that endings, however painful, often contain within them the seeds of new beginnings we could never have imagined, if only we have the courage to plant and tend them with wisdom, patience, and unflinching love.